Okay, let's get started. I'm going to work alongside you to set the system up from scratch with completely new accounts. That way, we'll likely see the same things as we go along, and it will give you some good exposure if you've never set up any of these services before. Google products make up the majority of our free services we use in the system, so I'll start by creating a new Google account. Let's go ahead and click on Gmail and create a new account for personal use. I'll go ahead and fill in my information here, and you may already have a Google account, and you're welcome to use it. Nothing we do in the system should affect it negatively in any way, because if you're like me, you likely already have an account dedicated to projects just to keep your inbox clean, if anything. So feel free to skip to the section on Google AI Studio if you elect to do so. Otherwise, go ahead and create a new account like I'm doing. Verifying a new Google account requires you to scan a QR code on a phone with an active SIM card. It will prompt you on the phone for verification, and if successful, it will move us along to Gmail. Now, I actually ran into some trouble on this step because there appears to be a limit to the number of accounts you can activate with your phone. Thankfully, I was able to find a service called Visible, which offers a 15-day trial, and it gives you a new number and an eSIM. You can use your existing phone number while keeping your existing service, so there's no impact. Plus, you get to try out a different carrier in case you're debating switching. They're using the Verizon network, and their prices are close to what I'm paying now, so it was a no-brainer for me to test out. And with no credit card required, it fits nicely into the services we'll use in this project, so thank you, Visible. With our Google account created, we now have access to Google Drive, which we'll use for storing our scraped data and data sheets. I'll go ahead and pin this for easy access. We'll also use Google Sheets to serve as our data tables. Google Sheets works really well on small projects for this purpose, but I'll go into an example later using the sitemap workflow for when it makes sense to use a proper database. I'll go ahead and pin this as well. Next, we'll go into Google AI Studio to get access to Gemini. Gemini will serve as our model in our RAG system. We'll program the model to only use information it's given from the knowledge base to answer user questions. Even though Gemini and other models know quite a bit, for this system, we only want it to answer questions based on the data we've collected. That's RAG in a nutshell. For a more detailed explanation, I recommend checking out Louis Serrano's most recent videos on the subject. He's very good at boiling down complicated material in machine learning and AI to make them feel accessible to anyone. His videos directly inspired me to pursue machine learning to the point of achieving the AWS specialty certification on the subject. So he's well worth your time, and I greatly appreciate his work. Check him out on Serrano Academy here on YouTube. I'll put a couple of links in the description. And back to Gemini. So since this is a new account, it has no history that can be used for age verification. I may eventually get prompted for it, and just to show you what that might look like, if we go over here, you can verify your age by providing an ID, credit card, or by taking a selfie. The last time I did this, selfie was not an option, and I just elected to use a credit card over my ID since it's easier to cancel a credit card than to go to the DMV to get a new ID in the case of a data breach. This does not put any kind of hold or temporary transaction on your card that I've seen, and it should be the only use case during this tutorial where you would potentially even need a credit card, as all the services we use should not require one. Now that we've set up an account and our past age verification, we should now have access to a Gemini API key. You can create an account specifically for this project or simply use the default key, completely up to you. This key is not one that goes away as soon as it's been presented for the first time. You can come back here later and copy it. So just go ahead and bookmark it if you haven't already, and we will set it up later in the credentials section of NNN. Next, we'll create a Pinecone account. Pinecone will serve as our vector database, which, if you're not familiar, is a specialized database which stores the numerical representations of the data we'll be collecting and eventually querying. I'll simply go through the process of generating the account, but we'll hold off on creating the index until we get to the upsert sub workflow a little bit later in the series. For now, I just need access to the API. I'll go into a bit more information as to how the vector database is actually set up, but for now, all I'm going to do is copy off the key to a safe place, and we will use that to set up the credentials in NNN. Next, we'll navigate to n8n.io to create an account. N8n is our workflow automation platform, which is extremely popular from what I've seen with tons of third-party and custom integration. It will be the main workhorse of our system, doing most of the processing and tying together the services that we'll use. N8n has a 14-day trial, giving a mix of their available cloud offerings. You get a cloud-hosted instance with the memory capacity of their cloud starter plan, and most of the features included in their pro plan. You also have the option to self-host it in, which is also quite popular because it's completely free. You can elect to start in a cloud trial or even a cloud starter plan, and then eventually export your workflows over to a self-hosted instance later, completely up to you. I'll just finish going through the setup process here. Doesn't really matter some of the options that you pick, don't worry about it. And with that, our workspace is set up and we're ready to start configuring. With that, we have all of the services required for the KB system to function. There are a few optional services that'll come up in the series, and I'll touch on them and each of the particular use cases as we come along. But with our N8n instance set up, we're going to go ahead and create a new project. This will put all of our workflows, credentials, and environmental variables in one place. This gives you some room to experiment with your own workflows in the personal folder, since credentials aren't shared between projects and the personal section. Let's create a new workflow, and in this menu, you'll see the option to add via URL or file. I've tried to make this process of importing my workflows into your N8n instance as easy as possible. Head on over to my GitHub account, link in the description, and we can start by importing the Getting Started workflow. In order to import from the URL, you need to select the raw file in GitHub like so. Then copy the URL. Now we'll paste the URL into the new N8n workflow, and we're good to go. Now this may look a little bit intimidating, but don't worry, there's not all that much you really have to do here. Since we haven't set up any credentials yet for the entire project, we're going to be able to apply all of the credentials at one time to all of these nodes. Let's zoom in a little bit to our first Google Drive node. And if you notice, it has, along with all of the other nodes, this little red exclamation mark. That's just N8n letting you know that this specific node needs its credentials set up. Let's go ahead and open it up. Google Drive and Google Sheets uses the OAuth 2 API, allowing you to simply press sign in and approve the access. With this method, it won't prompt you again for another 7 days. If this is something you end up using long term, you can create an OAuth 2 2.0 client in the Google Cloud Console and publish it as a test application. That way you won't get prompted every 7 days, which gets pretty old in my experience. I'll put some quick steps at the end of the video for those interested in how to set that up. For now though, I'll just sign in and do the same for Google Sheets. Each N8n workflow is initiated by some form of trigger, whether that's a manual trigger like this one, a webhook, an application-specific one, or a scheduled trigger. Most of the workflows I've created in this have a manual trigger, so you have full control as to when they're used. This Getting Started workflow will create the required folder structure, Google Sheets, and environmental variables we'll use for all the other workflows going forward. And it takes about 2 to 3 minutes to run in my experience. While that's running, let's go to Google Drive and see what it's making. We can see the KB system parent folder and all the sheets we've been using have been pre-filled out with some header information. This includes the source URL, date timestamp, and sources to help us determine how recently they've been updated. I'll go into more detail about this sheet in a bit, but for now, I'll let the workflow run and just skip ahead. You have a couple of places to monitor if the workflow is finished running. If you close the tab while in the editor section of the workflow, you can switch to the execution to see if the workflow is still running, has been successful, or errored out. The home page can also show you the active or previous executions. Let's head over to the environment sheet, which contains all of our environmental variables we'll create in our project. Rather than needing you to update every single node with your unique folder in Google Sheet, we'll instead use these variables so it's set everywhere at once. It is a bit tedious, but I promise it will save you a lot of time otherwise. We'll head back to the project view and go to variables. Feel free to set up these pages side by side and simply copy and paste the IDs and values into the variable section. I'll do a couple just so you see what I mean and then skip ahead. With the variable section all set up, all of your Google Drive folders and Google Sheets are going to automatically be referenced in all of the workflows going forward using this pre-configured usage syntax. Next, we'll go into the credentials section to add some new credentials for Google Gemini and Pinecone, which are a little bit easier because all they require is an API key. All we need to do is get the API from both services, and I'll go ahead and show you where to grab them. I'll just grab the default key for now, but you can generate one specifically for this project if you choose. Then back in credentials, I'll paste it in, and NNN will automatically test it. I'll do the same for Pinecone. With that, our basic credentials are in place, which should automatically apply to the workflows we'll be importing. All we need to do now is bring in the rest of the workflows, and how you do that is completely up to you. You can import each one via URL as we did with the getting started workflow, or download a zip and import them all via file. NNN does not have a method for importing the folder structure, so I'll have to create that myself. If you're not in the mood to import all of the workflows now, just grab the manager and crawl sub workflow. Let's go ahead and open up the manager to get started. This is our main workflow, which can be configured to work with multiple sub workflows. For example, you can use the manager to drive the crawler. It will take the initial page you set in this node. Then once more URLs are found, it will continue to crawl each one of those and update the sheets as time goes on. Let's do a quick example. Most government public-facing websites allow web scraping to some extent. I've chosen Ready.gov as the primary example because it has a good mix of HTML and PDF content. Plus, it's a bit smaller in terms of the number of pages, especially in comparison to a bigger website like NASA or the National Park Service. I've gone ahead and pre-filled this out for you, but if you know a site you want to scrape and it's legal to do so, go ahead and put it here in the source field. I've set the date time to the international standard ISO 8601, but you're welcome to swap it for a different formula for your specific time zone. The execution field tells us which execution of the workflow that data came from, which is helpful in troubleshooting. The job field here is to help differentiate runs. That could be a full system update that's done every month, or comparing between runs after adjusting some filters. For now, I'll leave this as default, then press execute to add our initial entry. Great, so as you can see, I have a few different colors here in my notes. Green are descriptions, and then these purplish notes are something that you might adjust for each run. For example, which sub workflow we'll call. Let's do that now and set crawl as our sub workflow. Each sub workflow contains a manual trigger, so you can execute a single run of that sub workflow rather than having to run it through the manager every single time. However, what the manager does for you is allows you to take a list of items, send each one through the set sub workflow, then essentially loop onto the next one, allowing you to go through the entire list rather than having to execute them individually. Okay, let's go ahead and open up the crawl sub workflow and make sure all of its connections are working. We had the benefit of the getting started workflow to have all of the credentials populate automatically. Open up one of the sheet nodes and select the only available credential. It will pop up saying that it's updated the credentials in all of the nodes. though it's usually a good idea to exit the sub workflow or refresh the page and make sure that all of the credentials are actually set in all the nodes before continuing. It can be a little hit or miss sometimes to get the credentials in the right place, but once they're set, they should be good to go for each subsequent run. I have a lot more to talk about regarding the crawl sub workflow, and we'll go into a lot more detail in the next video, but just so we have something to look at for all of our efforts, let's go back into the manager, then kick off a single run of the crawl sub workflow. I will, however, break the loop, so that way we're only going to process the initial URL that we set. Then once it generates a list of all of the URLs that it has collected, we'll be able to review that before rebuilding the loop and sending everything through for processing. So just to explain this process a little bit, what's happening here, it's taking that initial URL we set, passing it into the crawl sub workflow. The crawl sub workflow executes and updates all of its corresponding Google Sheets. Then once the run is completed, the manager will finish processing by deleting the item from input, moving it into its process sheet, and then continuing the loop if enabled. Let's open up the manager sheet and see what it's actually collected for us. So here we have a nice list of all of the URLs the crawl sub workflow was able to find on the Ready.gov homepage. However, if we look a little bit closer, you can see that not every URL we've collected is actually from Ready.gov. In order to prevent crawling sites that do not allow scraping or collecting data from sites that are not useful or applicable to our knowledge base, there are several filters available in the crawl sub workflow that, if enabled, allow you to filter these results out and they get logged to the error sheet, along with any URLs that come back as 404 or otherwise unavailable. I just wanted to touch on a couple of the other components of the manager. There's a few things that I kept in here that I think most folks would find useful, but they're ultimately optional. For example, Telegram is a useful messaging app and you can use it to send alerts directly to your phone. So for example, if there's an error counted in the workflow, that error message gets directly to your phone, so you can just hop into the console and take a look rather than having to monitor it. It's pretty straightforward to set up as well, but this is actually a good example on how the N8N assistant can help. So if I activate this node, I can ask it to generate some instructions on how to set this up. And while it's not perfect, it can usually point you in the right direction. This other grayed out item involves the N8N API, which unfortunately is not available on the cloud trial, at least at the time of filming. Maybe sometime in the future it will be. If configured, this would automatically unpublish a workflow if it encountered an error. That way it doesn't continuously try to process more data, especially if we're using the setup down below here. This is a schedule trigger that, if active and published, monitors if the workflow is currently running, and if there's any input items left, it would automatically restart the workflow for you. I found this was particularly useful when encountering crashes due to the limited memory on the cloud trial and starter plans. So I left this in just in case you subscribe to an N8N plan later. So that covers the gray optional sticky notes. The only one that's remaining but not visible here within the manager workflow are yellow sticky notes. That's to direct your attention to nodes that need to be configured one time in order to work properly for the full sub workflow. Usually this is a credential or API key that needs to be set. One final note on the manager is it's set up to run just one URL at a time, which is ideal for the limited memory and the cloud trial. If you upgrade or switch to a N8N self-hosted instance with more memory, feel free to change that setting to allow for multiple items. Thanks very much for sticking with me so far. In the next video, we'll look to configure the crawl sub workflow to get just the URLs we need rather than every single URL on the page. For those of you who are still interested in configuring the OAuth 2 client for Google Sheets and Drive, this next section is for you. Everyone else, I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so I've actually already set this up on this account, but I'll show you exactly what I did. First, go to console.cloud.google.com. You'll eventually get a prompt to turn on two-factor authentication. By March 30th, this will be a requirement for all new accounts. Go to the main navigation menu and go to API and Services, then select the OAuth consent screen. Then select Clients and create a new client. Select Web Application, and I called mine N8N. I'll put the redirection URLs that N8N requires in the description for an easy copy and paste, and then save. Once it's generated, it will give you a client ID and a secret. Just copy that off to a safe place, or it will give you the option to download the JSON of that information as well. From there, go to Audience and put your email address as the test user. Then under branding, I put my username as the app name along with the support email. Then added n8n.cloud as the authorized domain and put my contact information. And that's it. Now, if you haven't already, go back into the credentials section of N8N and sign into Google Drive and Sheets.